Welcome back to another episode of Rapid Results with Andrew Weiss. We have the incredible Shanif Dhanani here. And in case you're wondering who this Shanif guy is, he is from New York and he's an AI and ChatGPT consultant with a background in software development and data science. He helps businesses understand and build systems that connect their internal and proprietary systems to ChatGPT, enabling internal employees, customers, and other stakeholders to reap the benefits of using large language models on their data. He's worked at companies like Twitter, Booz Allen, and Tap Commerce. And he now is the CEO and founder of his own company called Locusive. Did I say that right?
Locusive, you got it.
Locusive. And so welcome to the show, Shanif. Tell us, what's the biggest and best business deal you're most proud of?
Oh man, starting right off the bat. Well, Andrew, thanks for having me. First of all, it's been an awesome to be here. I apologize for those of you. I'm in New York. You might hear sirens in the background.
Oh yes.
Very standard for those of us here. But no, you know what? The biggest and coolest thing I've done. It was back when we started Tap Commerce, which was maybe more than 10 years ago at this point. My background is in tech and AI, like you heard. And we built one of the world's first mobile advertising platforms. And at our peak, we were handling about 1 million ad requests a second. I built a lot of the AI that was using data science to figure out how to price these ads, as well as how to respond to them at such a large scale. So that was really cool, kind of the highlight of my tech career. We eventually sold that company to Twitter, so it all sort of worked out well. But that's probably the thing I'm really proud about in terms of something I was able to accomplish in my career.
What does that mean, 1 million ad requests a second?
Oh, it means we had a lot of hardware. So essentially, the world of advertising, you probably have had a few guests who've been in this world. It is crazy how complicated it is. When mobile phones first came out, they started to be this ad ecosystem where publishers who created apps wanted to get paid by showing ads. And so there's this ecosystem now where those publishers can send an ad request to something like an exchange. The exchange then fans that request out to a bunch of advertiser representatives. The representatives then have to decide, do they want to show an ad on this product? This happens, this was happening millions of times a second. And you have to be able to respond in less than 100 milliseconds, which is like how fast you blink your eyes, probably faster. And so it means that we had built up a lot of software and a lot of infrastructure to be able to show an ad to the right person at the right time for the right price.
Oh, that is so cool. And you ended up selling that company to Twitter. Was that bittersweet, or were you like Victoria's Secret when they sold their company? Like, geez, I could have taken this to the moon. Why'd they have to buy me out like that?
From a techie's perspective, it was kind of cool. It was an opportunity for us to see how a larger company was doing ads at the time. So we got to work on Twitter's ad platform. From the perspective of, I'm a startup guy at heart. So from the perspective of going from something small to something much, much larger, I realized that the larger thing wasn't for me, which is why I went back to the startup world. But it was one of those things where we worked. That was one of the hardest times I've worked, man. We were working long hours, 14, 15-hour days. And when you're dealing with 1 million ad requests, a lot of your stuff crashes a lot. And so we had to fix stuff in the middle of the night. I would sometimes get a buzzer at 3 a.m. and I'd have to wake up and start stuff over again. And so for me, it was a nice respite, good transition. But now I'm sort of back at it in the world of startups.
Oh, that's so cool. And I'm very excited to talk about ChatGPT and AI with you today. So tell us more about this overnight success. I mean, ChatGPT had, what was it, like 100 million users in a month or something, and the next closest competitor was 100 million users in 2 years. So what led us to the evolution of how ChatGPT became so popular in the first place?
I don't know if you guys experienced this, but the first time I tried ChatGPT, it was like an aha moment because I'm a software guy and a lot of my time is spent looking up stuff online or trying to fix really nuanced bugs. It could take a lot of time. And the first time I tried ChatGPT to fix the software, it got me the right answer within a couple of seconds. And so I think that's emblematic of why this thing has blown up. You're suddenly getting huge amounts of value, you're saving lots of time, and you're getting a lot of actually really good information at your fingertips in seconds, whereas it might have taken even 4 or 5 hours to find a piece of information before. Certainly the case in software development. And so, they say that every overnight success is 10 years in the making, right? So GPT 3.5, which came out earlier this year, was following 3, that followed 2, and they've actually been working on this stuff for a long time now, lots of years. But 3.5 was so good that I think it just got a lot of people really excited and really interested, and it just sort of the hype blew up, and it was really cool to see and cool to be part of. At least it's interesting for me to be part of that process now.
Oh, that's so cool. And how did you get involved in the space? And obviously, you have a lot of experience in tech and e-commerce and all these language learning models. But
Yeah.
how were you able to dive in and say, "Oh, I'm a consultant for this because I know exactly how to use it"?
Yeah, what's funny is I started using it, and then I found that it didn't do a few things that I wanted. Like, for example, I couldn't just ask it, "Hey, how many leads do I have in Salesforce?" or "What's in my product documentation, which lives on Google Drive? Give me the contents of page 33." So, like, what I started seeing was a lot of business owners wanted to use this, but they couldn't because a lot of their docs were behind firewall, or you needed to log in, and by default, ChatGPT doesn't have access to these things. And so it was kind of cool for me because my background is in AI and software and data. So I was able to build the pipes that connected your Google Drive or your Salesforce account to ChatGPT. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Now can I do this for my, Google Sheets, and can I do this for my email, and can you add this for my Slack workspace as a chatbot?" And so a lot of folks were just starting to get interested in what became possible by connecting their data to ChatGPT. And because I have a lot of experience building those sorts of data tools, I was able to jump in and hopefully deliver something that they appreciate.
I love that. That's the best way to, get good at things is to see where the gaps are and go, "Well, I can fix that. I know how to,
Yeah.
I know how to adjust for that." So let's talk more about your journey with ChatGPT is you're like, "Oh, this is so cool. It can do something in seconds," which I've been in a career would usually take hours.
Yeah.
It's still missing things. I can figure out how to close those gaps. So tell us more about what do you wish you knew earlier when you're just starting off with using ChatGPT in the first place?
It's funny that they're asking that because we're still so early in the world of ChatGPT, but 6 months almost feels like 10 years, right? From a few, like, things move so quickly that now a short amount of time feels like it was the result of a very large amount of time. So for me, what do I wish I knew earlier this year? I think that there's still a lot of things that I struggle with when it comes to implementing ChatGPT on my own data. For example, one of the biggest limitations right now is that you can only send in a few thousand words every time you want to get an answer. And you also, whenever you ask an answer, you also need to provide the right context for ChatGPT to answer you using your data.
I
Because
thought with the ChatGPT 4 update, I was told you could upload like a book the size of the Lord of the Rings, or is that not come through yet?
that's what they say, man, but it's 32,000 tokens, which equates to about 8,000 words, which is maybe 20 or 30 pages, maybe 40 pages. But,
Oh,
you know, essentially, you're really limited, right? So this would be awesome if I could. If I could just take all 1,000 pages of my product handbook and dump it into ChatGPT and ask a question about something that lives on page 534, we're good. But you can't. And that's a lot of the things that businesses are running into now. So, I wish I had known that before, but in a certain sense, it's also provided me with an opportunity to build the software that lets people find the right pieces of their data that I can send to ChatGPT so that they can actually ask a question. So that's one thing. Another thing is, hey, ChatGPT, if you use it through the API, they don't let you send a lot of information. They don't let you send a lot of requests. You kind of get what's called rate limited or timed out a lot, which means you have to sort of take your time when you send them stuff, and it makes your product, my product, a little bit slower for users. Still usable by far, but still one of those things I wish I had known earlier. And there's all sorts of things like this. Now, I'm nitpicking, right? This is such a cool technology. It's all interesting. These are really minor things that I'm sure OpenAI is going to fix. But the point is, if you're trying to build on top of ChatGPT or you're trying to use it for things like connecting your own data, you have to be ready for a lot of these challenges. And if you're not, maybe it's better to use a third party tool.
no, that makes a lot of sense. It's just being aware of what it can and can't do. It's definitely good to know. And I know you brand yourself as a ChatGPT consultant and LLM consultant, but how much have you played around with Bard and Claude and
Yeah.
Llama and all those? I'm curious your quick thoughts on all those.
I like Llama. It's super fast. I love Claude. Claude is one of those things, for those of you who don't know, it's from this company called Anthropic, competitor to ChatGPT. Claude actually lets you put in something like 75,000 tokens, which is 2 to 3 times what ChatGPT 4 lets you do. For what it's worth, I use ChatGPT 3.5 with the 16,000 token limit because it's much cheaper. But I digress. Claude is awesome. The reason it's awesome is because you can put in a lot more information, and it's super fast. You can get sort of a lot of long form content from it a little bit more quickly and a little bit more accurately. these LLMs still aren't great for long form content. They're still a little bit robotic and generic, but Claude does a really good job of providing you with like blogs or articles or newsletters. You'll still have to edit them, but it's a good start. Llama is really fast. Llama is the open source tool from Facebook. Really good. Bard I've used a little bit. I didn't. Bard sort of got a little wonky for me when I tried it, but this was about a month or two ago, so I'm sure it's gotten a lot better now. Shows you how fast things are going. But I think the whole ecosystem, the fact that there are so many of these providers is awesome, particularly for companies that are in regulated fields like medicine, because they're going to need to build their own open source versions of this, or at least implement them because they can't send data outside their systems. So it's a long way of me saying I think these tools are all really cool.
What I got out of that is it sounds like if you have a lot of words and like product information you have to pull from or summarize or stuff like that, Claude's the way to go because you can upload a lot more tokens, get more information. It sounds like ChatGPT though, they're still top for like creativity, writing, and like being able to like match your writing style per se. And sounds like Llama's kind of a mixture of those. Is that kind of a third grade summary of things?
It's a good, like, yeah, it's a good high level approach. Obviously there are nuances, details with everything. For example, a lot of people don't think Claude is as good with software development. So I probably would fall in that camp. I still use ChatGPT for a lot of my coding. I use Claude for a lot of my long form content. Llama I use every now and then, mostly for the novelty. Bard, I don't use as much, unfortunately, but I'm sure I will as Google makes it better. And so it's one of those things where you sort of get used to doing different things with different tools, and you're probably going to stick with that until and unless another tool comes out that's just a lot better. One thing to keep in mind, though, is even Claude, which can take a lot more content, is still limited, and it's still limited to maybe 75,000 tokens, which is about, I don't know, 20,000 words or so, give or take 15,000. So you're still not going to be able to dump a whole lot of information into it. And so that's one of the biggest issues with business today is if you've got a lot of documentation, how can you make sure that you can answer questions from that documentation given these what's called context windows or token limits?
Interesting. And you keep saying tokens. Why does it have to be
Yeah.
tokens versus just like words or characters, essentially?
Yeah, I apologize. When you're sort of in this field, you start using the jargon. These companies like OpenAI and Google and Anthropic, they've introduced this concept of a token, which is kind of like a couple of letters or a part of a word or an individual character, like maybe a semicolon. Now, the reason they use tokens instead of whole words is because the AI that runs this stuff basically processes the text that you get in small chunks. And what they call these things tokens. And when you have a token, it's actually a lot easier to turn those tokens into some sort of numerical representation that computers are better at dealing with than if you had a whole word. So you might hear the word token in general. One token, they say four tokens is maybe a word. I'm sorry, they say four characters is about one token. And so that's how you can start to think about this stuff.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. So let's talk about, I know a lot of people are still, even though with 100 million and counting, and maybe it's at 200 million by now of users of AI, there's still a lot of talk in the industry of just like, I don't know if I can use AI. It sounds too complicated for me. What are all the ethical implications with it? So what do you tell people to help comfort them about being okay with using AI and leveraging it?
The first thing I tell them is if you don't do it, somebody else will. So, you know, you're you're probably, I mean, unless you're close to retired or you don't care anymore, then that's fine, right? Who cares? But if you're really, gung ho and you're very career oriented, like those of us in New York tend to be, you probably want to get the best tools for your job. And AI is probably going to be in that toolkit at some point if it's not already. So I would generally say I understand that there's some sort of hesitancy to using it, but also you can just go and start using it right away. And it's very easy and it actually is very simple to use. And so that's how I started. I just went over to ChatGPT's website. They give you a few credits, for free to get started. And I just started asking it a few questions. And once when I had a coding issue, I asked it, hey, how do I solve this? And it came back with the right answer. And then I started using this tool called Copilot, which is AI for code. And so like you can start really simply. You don't need to dive all in. The folks who make these tools make it really easy to get started, and you're only doing yourself a disservice if you don't know what they are. And so it really behooves you to kind of get familiar with these tools. Now maybe you say, hey, look, I tried it, has no bearing on my work, it doesn't make any sense for me. There are folks like that. That's fine. At least you've tried it. I would I would argue that's probably not the case for most people, but sure, if that's your opinion, sure. But you got to at least try it because it's easy. It's free. It takes 2 seconds, and it probably would change your life at some point.
Yeah, and I love the analogy of sometimes AI only puts out what you put into it essentially, and so if you like tell it make me $1 million,
Yeah.
it's probably gonna be like what? But obviously you have to keep it. I think some person said it's kind of like a toddler, like, hey, can you
Yeah.
go collect this book from this bookshelf and bring the summarized information, or can you solve this little problem for me? It'd be like, okay, yeah, I got you, kind of thing. And I was following a tweet too about like the Hustle GPT guy. Did you hear about that at all?
No, I haven't.
So he basically he started a Twitter trend. He's like, okay, I'm going to see if ChatGPT can help me make $1 million. So I'm going to name it
Wow.
Hustle GPT, and it's going to tell me what to do every day for 30 days straight. And he essentially made all of his money off people joining his community. And so technically, he was getting closer and closer. But just,
Wow.
yeah, it's a reminder too that, like, it can only put out what we put into it. And so just like constantly having someone like Shanif to help you like tweak it and make sure you get the best out of it, I'm sure is definitely essential. And so speaking of that, yeah, can you tell us some more examples? So let's say you're a business owner and you're like, all right, how can I be better at marketing my business? And I sell, let's just say you sell voice coaching lessons, essentially. How would you use a chat GPT to build your voice coaching business?
It's a really interesting question because a lot of businesses want to use this tool, but they don't know how. And I almost always recommend them to start with a small problem that they have. So take a look at what you do on a day-to-day basis. And if there's something that is just taking up a little bit of time, 20, 30 minutes at a time, but you have to do it a lot, and maybe you might be able to automate it, but you probably have to do it yourself because it requires a little bit of thought. That's a really good opportunity to use ChatGPT. Now, maybe that's not necessarily growing or marketing your business, maybe that's operations, but I bet you if you find something that you're doing a lot that's taking up a little bit of time, like a good amount of time, and it's not really necessary, it's a bit frustrating, you probably could automate that away using something like ChatGPT. Now, if you really wanted to start creating new revenue generating opportunities, there's a few ways you could apply this. Like, say, let's just break it down: sales, marketing, and product. On the sales side, you've got folks today who are using ChatGPT to help you write emails. A lot of times those can be personalized emails. Like you can copy and paste somebody's LinkedIn profile and say, hey, ChatGPT, like, create a personalized email for this. A lot of times you can start doing personalization at scale. There's a few tools out there right now that let you scrape someone's LinkedIn and then write an email and do this several hundred or 1,000 times a day. Um,
What tools are those? That sounds pretty valuable.
I think there's one I started looking at called reply.io, if I remember correctly. I haven't used this myself. However, it's something that I want to use at some point soon. Drive your revenue growth with AI. So reply.io will let you automatically personalize things at scale, as far as I know. There's a few other tools out there that let you do something like this similar. I have no affiliation with reply.io. I just saw them
Yeah.
one day. Um, and then on the let's see, another way that sales folks at least are starting to use my stuff is a lot of times they'll get these really obscure questions from their customers on a call. For example, like one of my customers does financial retirement planning for government employees, and the government has all sorts of crazy policies. So, like a customer of theirs might say, "Hey, I'm a spouse of a surviving military, benefits receiver. I just hit 70 years old. Can I start borrowing from my federal retirement account next month?" Like what? And so these guys are on a call. They get a question like this from their customer. What they were doing before was they would have to message their team internally to look this stuff up and then to tell the customer, hey, I'll get back to you. Now, because they have a tool like mine that can connect their internal policy documents to a chatbot, they can just ask the chatbot and they'll get an answer back in a few seconds, and they can tell the customer the answer right away. And so sales guys are now using tools like this on their calls to answer customer questions. They're using it to transcribe their calls and get a sense for what messages work and what don't. So again, you talk about, hey, how does ChatGPT grow my business? I like to say it's really ChatGPT and other tools like this are really good at tasks, but they suck at jobs. So if you give them a job, like you said, tell a toddler to go get my book from the shelf and tell me what's on page 3. It's going to be great. But if you say, like you said, hey, how do I make me $1 million? It's not going to come back and tell you what to do, or maybe it is if you're this one guy. But if you're anyone else, it's not going to tell you anything. So you as the business owner need to know what your job is, what are your tasks in that job, where can you start to automate some of this stuff away, and how can you use automation right now to start growing in those areas. It's a long way of answering your question.
No, it's great because you mentioned, well, how does operations grow your business? I mean, I would say, well, if you're able to automate your operations, that gives you more time for marketing, more time for fulfillment, more time for sales, and be able to keep outsourcing time to other things that still, because it still takes time to grow your business. If you're a solopreneur or a small business, you got to wear many hats, where it's always better to outsource and delegate those other hats. And so my next question was asking, can you give more specific examples of like, what absolutely, like, if you're still doing this by hand or by yourself, like you're stupid and crazy, like what absolutely should be automated using AI when growing your business?
That's, you know what, I'm a bit biased, but I've been using ChatGPT for coding for the past 4 months, and I swear it's saved me at least 20 hours a week, just because
Wow.
it's so good when it comes to code. Code is a really good example because it's text and it's logical and structured, and so I certainly save a lot of time. I also use it now for outlining a lot of my articles. I don't use it for generating content, but I do use it for generating the outlines or giving me ideas about what to write about. The reason I don't, and I know this isn't really what you asked, but the reason I don't use it right now is because it still sounds robotic and it still sounds a bit too polished without saying anything. It says a lot without saying much, but it can do a good job of providing ideas. But as far as what you should be using it for, coding, I mean, if there's a software developer out there who's not using ChatGPT today, I would say you got to start. Um, it's really good for idea generation. So, hey, this is my business. Here's a paragraph of context on my business. Please provide me 20 ideas for what I should be writing about in terms of content. That's really good for that. Long form outlines. It's pretty good with that. Now, what's interesting is you asked me, hey, what do I need to be using it for? And I really said, hey, coding, and then outside of that, not much. And that sort of falls back on like, this is a really good tool, but it's not a good job doer. And so it depends on what your job is. You probably have something that you could use AI for, but there's nothing that you have to use it for. It's just if you use it, it will make you way more productive and way more efficient and probably save a lot of your own mental effort and energy. And so it really just depends on your job.
Yeah, I love that, and especially because we think that we have to be in the perfect mood or the perfect room to be able to come up with new ideas for what to write about, what to talk about, who to talk to, how to talk to them. When AI can just put you 80% of the way there, you can be like, oh, well, I know how to fill in the gaps. Like I could definitely customize it for myself. So that's a really good point you brought up. And then I'm curious too. I know you mostly work with bigger businesses, but are there any other solopreneurs or small businesses where you went in and as a case study, you're like, here's what I helped them with, and here's what also saved them time with outside of coding and content
Yeah.
generation?
Yeah, I think small businesses, what's interesting is small businesses have been more quick to adopt this than large businesses because they
Hmm.
don't have as many lawyers, they don't have as many risk and regulatory issues, and they're really hungry. So, for example, one of my first customers, same company I talked about earlier, government retirement planning, company called Parco, goparco.com. Check them out; they're awesome. What they do, they're a small team, 8 or 9 people at most. And what they do is they meet one on one with every individual government employee that they meet with. And they've been able to use my tool in conjunction with ChatGPT to reduce research time. I think they said that because they've got a tool like this now, they don't need to hire as many people. And that's because when you've got a tool that plugs into your initial research documents and can also research outside of your industry by using search engines and ChatGPT, you're suddenly cutting down the amount of time that it takes to get something done. So that's one example of a small business. Another example is a small company I work with down in Ruston, Virginia. They help companies get free money from grants, grantexec.com. Go check them out. And what they do is they help you apply for grants, and they're using my tool, which is plugged into their database, to find the best grant opportunities for every company that applies to them. So what we do is we take your company profile, we use ChatGPT and my tool to match it to the top 20 or 30 grants that are in their database of thousands, and then you can find the best grants to apply for. So small companies absolutely can use this stuff. Even what I said earlier, if you're a small business owner and you're just doing marketing or sales, you can use ChatGPT without tools like mine to just generate the content you need. So while I suspect big businesses will get a lot of efficiency, small businesses today are the ones who are making the most progress on this stuff. and really using it to its max. And it kind of makes sense because if you're a small business, you have fewer resources, you have fewer people. The more you can automate, the better and faster you'll go.
Well, that makes sense. I love that. And real quick, so tell us more about Locusive and how you can use it with ChatGPT or without ChatGPT, and how that helps
Yeah.
companies.
So, I mean, the core problem that we're trying to solve is when you use ChatGPT, it's awesome for answering things like, "Hey, who wrote this book? Who wrote Frankenstein?" It sucks at saying, "How many leads do I have in Salesforce?" Or "Go look at my product documentation and tell me how I'm different than this customer." So, what Locusive does is we build the data pipelines and the software to connect your data with ChatGPT. So, you can use this to build your own chatbots, or you can use our chatbot, and you can connect these bots to your existing tools like Salesforce or Google Drive or Google Sheets or your email, whatever it is. We'll get all this information, we'll read it into our system, and then you can start asking questions of it. So you don't have to go to your Gmail account and search for that email 30 days ago, or you don't have to go to your Google Sheets and say, "Hey, what row number out of this 1,000 row spreadsheet do I need to look at?" You just ask our bots, or you use our API to build your own bots. And so we provide those infrastructure tooling layers and the application layers for businesses to use large language models with their own data.
That's fascinating. So, because obviously, so Google Drive currently has its own search box, and so you're saying, and obviously it searches by keywords. But if you're looking for a specific keyword from a specific document, rather than looking up the keyword, jolly or something, it will say, well, it's here's a 10 pages on with the word jolly on it. You're like, I need to find jolly from November 1st, 2018, or something like that, and it could like do something like that?
Even more to the point, you can say, let's take an example I face in a real world. What is the maximum tax rate for uh, retirees this year? Right, that information is somewhere in your PDFs, hundreds of PDFs in Google Sheets. All you need to do is ask that specific question, and the bot will come back with the answer and link you to the sheet. So it's not even you're searching for a document now, you're just searching for the thing you need in that moment, and the bot will get you that information. You can still do what you wanted, find me the keyword for jolly, on this page on this day. But ultimately, what I found is business owners have a ton of these things that they need to look up every day, and they just want the answer right away. And so that's what the bot is designed to do.
Wow, that's so cool. I could definitely see that saving a lot of time. So that's awesome. Let's talk more about what's going to be most affected and least affected by AI. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm scared of losing my jobs. We
Yeah.
have to rebel against AI now." And some people are like, "Oh, I mean, if you're in sales, if you're in this, like AI is not going to affect you," kind of thing. And I tell people, I mean, the ice business used to be employ 60,000 people, but I think it's okay that people have freezers now. And obviously, I'm sure the horse business was great before cars came out and all that. But based on your knowledge and experience, what do you believe is most
Yeah.
affected and least affected by AI?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time right now. I've heard this as well. Now, I'm actually optimistic because a lot of folks that I've talked to are more in the camp of, "Hey, I'm really excited to use this," versus, "Hey, I'm worried about losing my job." So, as far as what I think is going to happen, and I've started to see this a little bit, I think AI is going to be able to automate a lot of the things that junior employees have been doing thus far. So, junior software engineers, junior legal professionals, accountants. I think that it's gotten really good, um, but it's still at a point where it doesn't do a lot of the things that a senior level employee would do. So while I am really optimistic, I think that what we might start to see is that companies start hiring fewer junior level employees, and they give their senior level employees access to these AI tools and expect them to do more. I don't know if that's the case because you could also make the argument that with these AI tools, you can have a junior level employee who costs a lot less do a lot more. So I do suspect we're going to start to see a redistribution of seniority in companies, and that goes for a lot of industries, right? You mentioned a couple of industries, ice and cars and horses. I think this is going to affect a lot of industries. Any sort of thing that's white collar that requires information knowledge is going to be affected by AI. Um, there are things though that are ultimately going to remain human. Like you buy as a human, and you sell to humans, and so you're going to need people who are able to connect with humans. I think that a lot of folks have said, well, writing and copywriting is going to be affected. I might actually disagree because the writing that's coming out of these LLMs right now is not good. It's pretty crappy, and so humans are able to do a lot better of a job when it comes to writing impactful things that are trying to connect with humans. Teaching, I think, might be affected in a certain way, but I also think that teachers are going to be more empowered to use AI. So I think what I'm trying to say is every industry is going to be impacted, but I suspect what's going to happen is some jobs might be cut, but a lot of other jobs are going to be benefit from the ability to use AI. And it's one of those things where it becomes a really good tool for those people who are working in any industry.
Yeah, that is interesting. And for those listening in, we are talking, it's August 2023, and the writer strikes are going on right now. And I think most of the writers are pissed off that studio executives can think, oh, I can just have
Yeah.
ChatGPT write my movies for me and write my books and scripts and stuff. And so writers are worried about that. I know it's tricky too because it's curious because the writers can use the chat GPT how they want to as well. And of course, all comes down to how good you are at prompting and like you said, filling in the gaps. And I think it's definitely, curious and scary the fact that we're still in beginning stages. And as we know, AI and technology is going to keep getting better and better. But it sounds like you're still confident that we're still a few years, maybe even a decade out from having competent writing skills from an AI machines.
Oh, one thing I've learned to do is not forecast too far in the future. I used to use AI to predict stocks, and I quickly got humbled by doing that. I
Sometimes
think
it works, sometimes it
some
doesn't. Yeah.
it works not bad. It works until it doesn't, is sort
Yeah.
of what I learned. So I can tell you sort of what I'm seeing right now is that long form content is not good from these AI tools, and it's just not good. Now, how far away are we from being able to have really high quality scripts or plays or whatever it is? I don't know. I don't know. I think it might be a few years out, but things are moving so quickly, it could be a lot less. I wouldn't, I think it will happen at some point, but I also know the way that these things work under the hood. And I know that they're not really optimized for a lot of this stuff for like long form creative content is very difficult to do, especially with context windows that are just a few thousand words or tokens. So it's a way of me hemming and hawing, but I don't think it's going to come anytime soon, and that's where I'll leave it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Like, obviously, if you need it to generate a headline or a paragraph or some like hooks to something, like it's good at that. But it makes sense, like technology wise, it would take a lot of work and data to process putting together a novel that could be a bestseller because like you said, it makes sense technology wise. It's very far out. Essentially, is that essentially what you're saying?
I think so. There are ways to get around this right now that some people are trying. I just talked to somebody whose brother is writing a play using ChatGPT
Okay.
in Spanish. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Hmm.
Now, I was thinking, like, how is he doing this? I think what you have to do is every time you start a new chapter or a new, I don't know how plays are structured, you have to summarize the old play so that it doesn't get overloaded. And then you have to provide a script or an outline for what you want it to do next. So maybe there are ways to get around this, but even then, I can't imagine the content to be that great, seeing what I've seen today. But so, yeah, I think the technology is still a little bit, has a ways to go, a little bit.
Well, and I like that too. Just like going back to like why you should leverage ChatGPT is like what would take 5 years to write a play. Now you can do it in one, hopefully, and then being able to put out 10 plays in 10 years. They're still top quality versus trying to figure out every single detail all the time, essentially. So that sounds like that's what your is this the first play that your colleague is putting together with ChatGPT?
This is someone I talked to. I just got married a couple months ago, and this
Oh,
was our
congrats!
photographer's brother. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So our photographer's brother in Mexico was writing a play. Now I have no idea how that's going, but I do agree with what you said, Andrew, where you can use this in ways to make yourself way more efficient. And I think that's the thing I'm harping on is like, how do you build business tools to do this? The one thing we haven't really mentioned yet is these tools are actually really good at making intelligent, automated, logical trains of thought, which is something machines have never been able to do before. You can have a machine take in a bunch of information, give it a question, and it'll reason through to get a right answer. And that opens up a world of possibilities when it comes to better automated software. So I think that you can start to become way more efficient by having it do your thinking for you, in addition to doing your content generation.
No, I love that. No, it makes a lot of sense. Um, all right, so let's talk about yeah. So you kept bringing up the word tools. Let's talk about your tools arsenal. I know people love hearing the tool stack and what you use. So give us a rundown of how you're making your life easier with the various tools you're using.
That's interesting. It's funny. I'm a guy who's starting a business, so I'm doing everything from sales to marketing to sending letters to filing legal docs. So the main tool I use, at least when I'm coding, is this tool called IntelliJ. It's a company it's from this company, JetBrains. I don't know how many of your listeners are coders, so I don't want to bore them. But there's a cool tool that plugs into it called Copilot, which is AI generated code. Pretty useful. I also use ChatGPT quite a bit. So like if I have a bug in my code, I'll go tell ChatGPT to fix it. That saves me at least 10 minutes or 20 minutes every time there's a bug because I don't have to think about it. As far as everything else, I'm using Notion quite a bit. You've probably heard a lot of people tout the benefits of Notion. I run the whole company off of it. It's our internal wiki. And I'm building a Notion integration for my company for Locusive so that I don't have to keep searching through Notion, which is kind of fun. Google Workspace, I use quite a bit. Slack, I use a lot. I mean, we built our first bot on Slack as a chat bot, so I use it quite a bit. Webflow is great for people who need to create websites. Very easy to create websites. HubSpot, I've started to use a little bit. There's probably like a stack of 10 or 15 tools. I don't want to bore people that most startups are using today, and I'm probably using about 80 to 90% of those tools.
Have you heard of Gamma app yet that creates websites for you?
I have not. No, I'll have to. Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
It's gamma.app, and it's a text to website tool, which is kind of neat together. But I think there's still, I haven't mastered it yet, but it is cool. And I also like to use it for presentations too, where you can literally say, make me a presentation about pitching my coding company to Microsoft or something like that. And it'll be able to put together all the slides, all the text, all the images for you. So yeah, I haven't played with Webflow yet, but that sounds cool too.
Cool.
Let's hear about your mentors and inspirations that you're learning from, and how'd you come across them?
I think very sort of randomly but fortuitously. So like if you ever hear someone say, "Hey, I did this on my own," they're lying. Like nobody's an island, right? So I think you get
Yeah.
people across your career who are helping you out in a given time, a season, or through your career. I remember when I first started, there was this guy I really looked up to. His name was Dan Usher. When I worked at Booz Allen, he was really, really, really good when it came to infrastructure. So, I leaned on him quite a bit. He had already been working at the company. He took hopefully a liking to me. And so that was sort of one of my first mentors. And then, as I started working on Tap Commerce, which was that startup, the founders that I joined up with were really, really, really smart. So Brian Long, fantastic sales guy. Andrew Jones, AJ is like one of the best product guys I've ever worked with. And it just so happened that I had the good fortune of working with them, and I learned a lot. And so for me, it's one of those things where I've always tried to push myself to like try to get into the next thing that is just out of reach. And when you do that, you find people who are already at that level who can sort of, if they take a liking to you, or if you work hard enough, they will work with you to get better. And so for me, it's always one of those things where I'm always pushing myself, which allows me to get access to people who are really good at what they do and who I can start to learn from. So from my perspective, it's one of those things where when you work yourself hard enough, you will eventually come across people who will help you work harder.
Well, I love that. And for those listening in too, what would you tell them when it comes to finding a mentor or finding that community of people who can help support you and lift you up? Like, how'd you go about that?
First of all, I think you have to know yourself. You have to know, hey, look, this is what I care about. This is what drives me. And it sounds so easy, but it's funny because that's actually the blocker for a lot of people, particularly in their 20s. You don't really know what you want to do. But let's say you know what you want to do. Let's say you're maybe like me, you're a software developer who's always wanted to get into the startup world. You can easily find folks like that. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can find them in local meetups. You can find them online. You can find them on lots of areas. And so it's likely they're not going to be in your network. So you're probably going to have to do a little bit of searching and saying, well, what sort of companies do I really admire? What sort of founders do I really care about? Do I know anybody in my network who might be connected to startup life, VCs or investors? And you kind of have to make a short list of folks who you want to get connected with, and then reach out to them and see how you can help. One of the things I've learned in my life is the more you add value without expecting anything in return, the faster you're going to find people who are really good and can help you advance your career. So let's say you find somebody, let's say a startup founder, go offer to run their social media, or go offer to build them a free POC, or go offer to do something that you're good at for free, and say, hey, look, I just wanted to get connected. I wanted to be in your network, and I wanted to sort of show you what I could do. But the key is identify what you care about, Don't be afraid to reach out and then offer value indefinitely and with an unlimited amount of gusto, and you'll get a lot of good things come back to you.
Well, I love that, and I love and I one of the things I've learned over the years too is like when you ask people, what can I help with? What do you need help with? Like they don't always want to put the decision power to that. They're like, oh, I don't know, I'm good, blah blah. But if you say, hey, I noticed that your social media hasn't gotten any posts in the last 2 months. Let me create your next 10 posts for you and send them over to you. People are more likely to say yes to that and agreeing to help that. And so I like what you said too about like helping people with something specific rather than just like messaging people and say, what can I help with? Kind of thing.
Yeah, because it shows you're authentic and you care, right? Like it's
Mhm.
really easy to say, "Hey, what do you need help with?" Then the person who you're asking has to think and they have to put mental effort into it. It's like kind of unfair. But if you say, "Hey, I'm really good at this. Can I do this for you?" Then way easier for both of you.
Oh, I love that. Let's talk about imposter syndrome in AI.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned that doing code saves you 20 hours a week. But do you ever present anything to any of your clients using AI and be like, oh, am I really this good, or is it just AI making me look good? I'm curious if you could talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, dude, it's funny because like AI is fascinating to me. The fact that you can take a bunch of data and predict, for example, who's going to churn or who's going to buy this product or what's the next best word to spit out in a sequence of words just kind of blows my mind. So there's almost always a sense of imposter syndrome, like, oh man, I hope this works this time. Of course, it's going to work this time because you've tested it 100 times. Like every time I demo my bot for Slack, and I say, well, let's ask a question about this piece of information in this sheet or this document. I'm like thinking, man, I hope this works this time. So every time I do this, I'm like, there's a certain sense of fascination that it will work reliably, and then there's a certain sense of I really hope I'm not coming across as a fake. I really hope I'm being sort of genuine because I care about that and maintaining my integrity. Because if you're trying to sell, I'm not the type of person who can sell anything, sell ice to an Eskimo. I'm like, this is what I've got. I hope that this fits your needs. Hopefully it does. Um, so maybe other folks won't have problems with that, but every time I sort of demo what I'm doing and I talk about what I'm doing, it is one of those things where it's like a little bit too much hesitation, and that's something I'm trying to work at. But it's a long way of me. I don't want to ramble. It's like, yes, imposter syndrome is there. Even though I've been working in data science for 10 or 15 years, there's folks out there who are way, way, way more knowledgeable to me. You as a person just have to stop comparing yourself to those folks. You just have to say, this is what I could do. Here's what I've done. Let's work together. I promise it'll be a good experience.
And I like what you said too, that you have to remind yourself, "Oh yeah, I have done this 100 times. I
Yeah.
I do know a little bit what I'm talking about, and my track record can show it." And like you said too, it's always funny and scary too, taking on new endeavors, new projects, but you just have to keep going with what you know, but also trust yourself to adapt accordingly. So I like the way you phrase that. And then I know we have a few minutes left here, so I have a few questions to wrap up. What's the next end game that you're working on?
It's funny. I started last year was a year that I had to shut down a startup that I had been working 5 years on. And if you had asked me at that point, hey, do you want to do something else? I'd be like, no way, man, I am done. And then like for most entrepreneurs, I was like, after a few months, I said, well, I kind of have this idea. I want to see if this works. And I have this thing I want to work on. I realized I still have the bug to build something big. So Locusive is my attempt at that, but I'm doing it very differently. I'm doing it very, very systematically now. So for me, the big thing I'm trying to do is turn Locusive into a very, very large company, and I'm doing it in a way that is not hasn't been done very often before, which is sort of taking it slow, not taking on a lot of money until I really have something that works, moving very, very systematically. So that's what I'm trying to do now.
What does a large company mean or look like? What's the
Yeah.
vision for how far you see Locusive going?
There's sort of the ideal, but then there's like, okay, if that doesn't happen, what happens? So like the ideal is go public and make it at least a multi-billion-dollar revenue company. But that's something that maybe I will run out of steam. Maybe I won't want to do that. Maybe 10 years go by and I'm at a point where I don't need that. For me, a large company is something that allows me to either draw quite a bit of money from it on a year to year basis or sell it. I don't know what that number is, and I actually don't want to put a number on it. Whether that's 100 million or a billion or even 10 million or even 1 million. I'll know it when I see it, is the kind of thing that I'm saying. But that's sort of what I'm trying to do now, is build something sustainable and high value and just enjoy the ride doing it, but also try to take it as far as I can.
Well, I love that, and that's definitely exciting. You know, bringing people on the show with such big visions and aspirations, and wanting to build $1 billion company. And going into the mindset of things, when Twitter bought your company, could you have quote unquote retired if you wanted to?
Yeah, I probably don't need to be working now, but I'm also the type of person, if I'm not working, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I've traveled a lot, which is great. I've done a lot, but there's a certain sense of joy and fulfillment I get from working and building. Specifically, I'm a builder. It just happens that I build with tech and tools and software. I get a lot of joy from building, and I get a lot of joy from seeing people use the things I build. And so for me, it's one of those things where I just want to keep pushing myself and seeing how far I can go.
I love, but what helps you fuel that hunger to keep working and get that fulfillment? I mean, most people are like, "Oh yeah, I'll take the money and keep on chilling." Like, what helps fuel you to stay motivated and keep going?
I bet you, I wish my wife knew. I wish I knew. I wish, like, if she knew, she would have been like, okay, we can do this without you having to do it this way. So, because I'm still working, I keep track of the time I spend now. I spent like 80 hours last week on this stuff. So, and I do some 13 or 14-hour days still. I don't know. I just know that that's who I am. And so I used to fight it and I used to deny it. And then I was like, well, let's just embrace it. So I kind of have a sense for why I am the type of person who wants to keep pushing and keep getting better. And I find a lot of joy from being able to level up. Like, I played a lot of video games as a kid. But that's just innate to who I am. And I've got some ideas of why, but I try not to dive too deep into that at this point. I just try to know that that's who I am, and I try to push forward because of that.
No, it makes a lot of sense. All right, we have a couple questions left here. What would you tell our entrepreneur audience? What are the non-negotiable actions to be successful as an entrepreneur?
I think first you have to know, why is it that you're working on something? Is it like, are you working for the money, or is it, like, for me, is it just fulfillment? So knowing why you're doing what you're doing, I think, is extremely important. There have been times where I've worked on stuff without knowing why, or thinking it was because I wanted the money, and that really wasn't the driving factor, and those just fell flat on their face. So one, know why you're working on what you're doing. Two, I think, take it slow when it comes to your early team. You want to make sure you're hiring people who really execute, who do a really, really good job at what they do, who are experts at what they do. And you want to probably hire folks who are diverse in skill sets from you, but people who you get along with. Now, you might be a solopreneur or you might be a solo founder. In that case, when you do hire your first employee or you do bring on a co-founder down the line, the same rules apply. But if you're a VC-backed founder and you're starting to build your team, you really want to make sure you've got a diverse set of people. And this is really, really, really hard to do. So you're going to be pressured to hire early, but don't do it. Just make sure you're taking your time, because it's better to not have somebody in a role than to have somebody bad. I've had to fire folks, and that's just not a fun place to be. And it's just not a place you want to be. So diverse teams that work well together. The third thing is, I, I think customer validation and getting that as early as possible in as many ways as you can is really important. I've been in businesses before where I built a product that I thought was everyone's going to love, and it turned out nobody cared. And so now what I'm doing is getting customers to pay for features before I even build them. Pay for features. Like, who's going to pay for someone to use a feature that they're paying for? It's awesome that people are doing that. Getting LOIs, letters of intent. So customer feedback, pre-validation, super important. Those are sort of the most important things in the earliest stages. It really just comes down to talk to your customers a lot, iterate quickly, and do it with people who you like. Uh, Lots of other things you can do when you grow and scale, but those are the things that small businesses and startup founders need to worry about.
No, those are great answers. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned co-founders. I know that's a big
Yeah.
question. Like, how do you know whether or not you should bring in a co-founder? Like, it seems like everyone says, "Oh, well, if you're good at marketing and sales, bring on a co-founder who's good at finance, and vice versa." What are your thoughts on co-founders?
It's interesting. I saw a tweet the other day that was like, VCs will reject you if you don't have a co-founder. And that's the biggest source of sort of startup failure, is co-founder friction. And I'm just kind of like, these are two competing things here. And there's this newfound, I think, philosophy that if you don't have a co-founder, you're not dead in the water. You might be okay for a while. I think that you need to bring on someone when you start stagnating, or your business starts stagnating because you're not able to execute on the parts of the business that need to be executed on. So for me, I'm a tech guy by nature, and I've learned a little bit of marketing and sales. But if I had somebody who was focused full time on sales right now, I probably could double my load, double the deals I'm doing. Now, why am I not doing that yet? It's because I'm right now focused on building out the rest of the MVP, which should be done in a month or two, and then heads down going in on sales. So you kind of feel it. You kind of feel, all right, like we're stagnating a little bit too much, or we're stuck in the water here, and it's because of this or that. So if you're a technical person, you're just not closing deals, probably want a salesperson or a marketing person. If you're non-technical and you're like, hey, I've got this amazing business opportunity, I've validated it in these 3 ways, but now I need to build it. Probably when you should think about bringing on a tech person. You can outsource your technology, you can outsource your marketing, you can outsource your sales, but if there are core things that you need to make your business grow, you probably want a co-founder to help with them.
I love that. I love that. And is there a favorite question you like to ask someone before you work with them or hire them?
I asked them a ton of questions. The thing I've learned to do though is work with somebody on a small project for an extended period of time before we sort of go further. So in general, it's one of those things where first I want to make sure I get along with this person, get to know them, make sure that their skill set is different. And then if they're actually crazy enough to do a startup, then I'll suggest that we actually start working on something together. And that'll tell me a lot from there.
Well, I love that. Yeah, just put them in the fire. It's always the best way.
It's what startups are. So you kind of have to.
Yeah, seriously. All right, well, we have 2 questions left. Shanif, how can we best contact you, get a hold of you, check out Locusive? Tell us about all that.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can always follow me, LinkedIn /in/ Shanif Dhanani. Post a lot of stuff there. Again, trying to add value. You can always email me, Shanif, SHANIF, at locusive.com. Website is locusive.com. So if I can ever be of assistance or answer questions or provide help, please feel free to reach out. I always love talking to people who are interested in this stuff.
No, fantastic. And what's the one takeaway you want someone to have with this interview today?
Start using Start using generative AI if you haven't already. You don't need to use it every day. You just need to try it. If you've never tried it, you got to know what this stuff is about because it is going to change a lot of the world. So just start using it today if you're not.
Love it. All right, everyone. This concludes another episode of Rapid Results with Andrew Weiss. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you all next time for our next episode. So take care, everyone.